Okay, so guys, for our next speaker, Juho, he's already online with us. Juho is an active open sourcer. He's a core team member of projects like Blender or Webpack. He's behind the Survive.js effort, organizes React Finland and GraphQL Finland. And in his talk, he will discuss state management. So please welcome Juho, say hello to him in the chat. And Juho, the time is yours.
All right.
Have fun.
I hope you hear me. And yeah, as mentioned, I'm a writer and I'm a developer. Now I get paid to fix people's Webpack configurations. So it's, yeah. But as mentioned, I organized React Finland. Of course, this year we have to kind of skip. We have to run online as well. But yeah, you have to adapt. But to the topic, so I will show you the slides. I'm going to discuss Sidewind. I hope a lot of you know Tailwind. Then Sidewind makes more sense, but you don't have to know Tailwind styling approach to get something out of the presentation. So I hope you remember the H before NPM, because what we did in the past, it was what I call artisanal JavaScript, which means I think it was one of my first client projects. I discovered a tool called Regard.js, which gave me modules, and then I wrote a lot of JavaScript. So I wasn't able to use a lot of ready-made packages. Instead, I wrote a lot myself, and it was one way to do it. Then what happened after a while, we started getting new solutions. Maybe you remember Prototype, jQuery, MooTools, MojiKit, Backbone.js, AngularJS, React, Vue, Angular. And then now we have Svelte and many others. And then in terms of CSS, what happened? We went from inline styling to separate the CSS. So we separated the files. So we had JavaScript and CSS files. And then we started doing CSS in JavaScript. And then we started doing CSS in HTML. And that's sort of what Tailwind is doing. So it's a bit like CSS in JS without the JS part. What it means is that, well, I'll show you in a bit, but just to give you some idea of what happened in 20 years, that was 2002. So we had sites like this, so we didn't know anything about colors or web design, or, I mean, what you never know. I think we won't go back to this anytime soon, because 20 years later, it's like this. But still, you see it's structured. We have very like clear, let's say, like on this page, we have header, we have footer, then we have some content, and we have blocks, and it's very structured. And that's something we can model with a solution like Tailwind. So what Tailwind looks like is this. So we have classes. And in classes, we describe that for this element, for this HTML element, we want the flexbox, and we want columns. We want background that's gray. Then we describe second one that has padding and some padding on bottom, and then so it's just it looks a little different than CSS you might normally write. So we, instead of writing class names and writing the CSS rules elsewhere, we actually see a small utility. We have utilities to describe what everything looks like, and at first it's weird, because now you're writing a lot of class names, and for what? But yeah, so that was the padding 8 to every direction, padding bottom 12. Then we say on medium to this margin X auto on medium resolution, so we get the square of breakpoints. Here was the flexbox example, but if you have used CSS in JS, this might look a little bit familiar. Here, one more example gap. So why did I get into Tailwind? It was because of this client. So I was discussing with the client, and normally I do React, and I was just like proposing that maybe we should, because they had the mockups, I was discussing with the client that you have the mockup, so I can do a nice React site for you. So let's use some Next.js and React, and then some Emotion or Team UI, or just a standard React project, more or less. But the client was saying that the only limitation of this project is that you cannot use React. That you have to do it without React, and just let's use pure HTML. And then I was like, yeah, okay, we can do it, but I want to use Tailwind. So I didn't know Tailwind yet, but I knew it's close to what I'm used to. So then I proposed, let's use Tailwind for styling, and the client was fine. Of course, that meant that I still had to, because there's some logic on the side, so I had to solve the logic portion. But so for logic, the point was that for logic, for anything more complex, I wrote JavaScript by hand, and that wasn't very nice. So I think the HTML and the Tailwind portion was fine and quite easy even, but it was just the JavaScript portion I didn't like very much. And then, so in this case, yeah, no React, HTML, Tailwind, Vanilla.js. I didn't use even jQuery. It was very small site that was delivered fast. It was just a couple of weeks, a couple of days per week. The client got it very, very fast. But so what if it was possible? So one of the outcomes of this project was that I started thinking about this logic issue. Like I was writing tens of lines of code for something that should not need tens of lines of code, something that might need maybe a couple of lines if I did it right. So then I started thinking, is there a way to connect the class names with some logic? Because when you use Tailwind, it's all about these class names. So if I had something that could control class names within markup, then I would more or less have what I would like. And that was the thought experiment. Can I do it somehow? Then I started thinking, and that's how Sidewind appeared. It's as an idea, it's not unique. You will find other way more popular solutions. So this is only my take on it. But I think it makes a little bit more sense after I show you some examples. So where Sidewind sits, it's here. It's between markup and logic. So I don't care about styling. Styling is something for Tailwind or some other solution. It doesn't have to be Tailwind. It's not really coupled. Only coupling is the dependency on class names. And then on this pyramid, it's only about state. So I don't care about components. I don't care about component structure or how you write your site. I don't care about views. I care only about state. So that's the only thing I care about in Sidewind. So what's state? In this approach, we have what I call X-state. So in X-state, I mean, you have to remember that everything is going to exist in HTML. So we're going to do most of things in HTML. And here in X-state, we put some JavaScript object. So in this case, we use a Boolean. It could be object or something else. But here we put the Boolean to it, and then we display the value through a span. And then in the span, you see the value. Of course, you don't go very far with that. So here, it looks like we have X-state is false, and then we display the value, and then we change the value with set-state. So when you hit this, click this button, I'm going to get the false and going to invert it so it becomes true, and then we show the new state. Then I have what's called derived state, because in many applications you have state that depends on other states. So here in the binding, I tell that I want amount times interest. That's the total, and that's very useful because this way you can make quite complex applications with dependencies in data. And then I can do bindings against attributes. So for here, I take like the website of the approach and put it to href. So that it's totally arbitrary. I could do something more complex with this. And you need some kind of looping construct. So here I have what I call xeach. So I iterate through this list and then use HTML template syntax to model the iteration logic. So what happens against each item. So here inside the list, I generate the items. Then I have what I call labels. So if you're familiar with React, we have something like we have context in React. And the point of context is that it lets you access data that's somewhere in the tree. So in this case, I use label internationalization, and then I refer to it later in my code to translate my app. But it's more or less like context in React, and this can be nested, and it just goes through the entire tree and finds the labels. One of the features that looks useful, that's important to have, data sources. So here we get something that's more reactive. So for X closest, I did X closest to model this behavior that tracks mouse cursor. So I can tell, like, I always know what's wait a minute, it's X closest. Yeah, it's what's closest to the top edge of the window. Yeah, that's that's the point. I will show you the real demonstration in a bit, so it makes sense. But it tracks what's closest to the top of window, and with this you can do table of contents and these kind of things. So you get a stream, and I mean from this selector, which we're watching all the H2s, H3s, and from this set we always know what's closest to the top edge of the screen, and that's useful information to have for something like table of contents. So we just have the DOM nodes there, and then we display. Then another thing I did was x-intersect. So I know when I have intersection, because with this thing I can do lazy loading and so on. So it's using an intersection observer inside, and then some timing options, x-interval. So again, I have something running that's generating new times, or that's triggering every once in a while, and then I get new data to this to X state, and then I can do queries. It can be that I will change the syntax for X promise and make it more like a state machine, but for now it's like that. So I can give it something that resolves. Like here I give fetch, and then I can deal with the errors and the result later in my code. So eventually it's going to resolve into state, and then I display the state. So to get the main features of Sidewind, what we have is a tiny runtime. So it's about 5 kilobytes minified, 2 kilobytes if I cheat chip it, and if I include only core features, it's half of that. I could still improve the build by making it possible to tree shake. So it's structured so that it will be quite easy to pull off, but I didn't see the need yet because it's quite small already. As it happens, it looks like it's enough to bind state to the DOM and manage it in the DOM. So it's very, very close to HTML, and I can do simple behaviors like tabs and even some more complex ones with it. One of the side effects of the design is that it's following this approach of progressive enhancement. So if I don't have JavaScript enabled, I still have meaningful HTML on the page. And my feeling is that it's potentially useful for small to medium-sized apps. So that's where I want to start trying out the solution. see how it works out. Because I think for something like it's enough to have Tailwind and Sidewind, and then some solution for components. I will show you something in a little bit. It uses this directive approach. So even, in practice, you will end up writing this code in HTML, but with directives, you can extend the system. So you can tell if you're missing something, you can write your own X something that's wrapping maybe some source or some other behavior. So in that sense, it's a bit like Vue. So what I learned from this experiment is that it can make sense to store state within the DOM. So we don't need virtual DOM or anything complex. We can use the DOM itself and something like a mutation observer to track the state. So we already have the technical solutions in place, but we have to wrap them in the right API to get something like this done. What I discovered is that query selector all from the standard API is quite powerful, but it has some annoying limitations. Like this, I cannot query based on partial attribute name, which will be useful. So I have to do a little bit more work than I would like to do. And as I mentioned, mutation observer is a great fit for if you want to do a light state manager within HTML. It's a great fit. I use TypeScript a lot in the code base. I wrote the whole library in TypeScript, and as an outcome, it's very easy to refactor and move things around. Main limitations. Well, I don't have a router, but that's not my concern, so it's fine. I don't have server-side rendering, but then I was thinking that maybe I don't need one. I wrote a small demonstration to show what I mean. I don't have typing because it's in HTML, so it's. But I also have some idea how to do this. So I will show you a demonstration where you see the direction where you might get typing eventually. And nobody's using it, but that's the fun thing. So you can be the first user if you want. So what are the next steps? Yeah, it will be fun to start using it on my own projects. It's just working with clients at the moment, so I haven't had time to rework my own sites, but it's a good fit for what I have in mind. And of course, over time, you've discovered that you're missing some features, so then you add more directives. And this typing problem, but I'm not sure if it's even worth solving it, but it can be that we can solve it. And maybe we can even get rid of the runtime. So, but that's another question. I think you always need a tiny bit of JavaScript. It's impossible to avoid. So it can be that the current approach is close to optimal in terms of runtime size. You can find it online. I think I will show you this later. And there's a starter kit, which I actually finished about 45 minutes ago. So it sort of works. So you can try the approach in a tiny boilerplate. Might have some bugs in it, but it's more fun. Then if you want to learn more about this kind of approach, you can find alternatives online. So I would look into Alpine.js. So it's like it's closer to AngularJS than my approach. So mine is maybe more like React, but Alpine.js is more like Angular, but it's also super popular and powerful and very much used. So it's a established option. Then there's something called AMP bind. I don't know much about AMP, but if you use AMP, then this is for you. And Mavo is something opinionated, similar again. And Svelte, which is a powerful and popular approach that's based on a compiler. And of course, with Vue, in Vue 3 we have composition API, which is powerful, and apparently it's doing more or less what I'm doing, so that's fine as well. And I think we're already seeing the next generation approaches to managing state, but it's just that people don't know what are the solutions or what's going to be the next big thing. But it can be that we will see some kind of movement in the next years as people figure these things out. because it's always like we go from backend to front end and back. So it's this movement between the ends. Yeah, but before Kiitos, I will show you about it. Oh. So here's the demonstration side. So yeah, that's just false. And here I have this basic state management approach. Like, yeah, just keep the state here. Everything is editable on the side. It's not totally obvious, but you can try doing something more complex. And here we have something more, a bigger example. And the funny thing is that I wrote the code editor with the solution itself, so it's sort of recursive that way. And that's the attribute example. That's nothing special. And then this one is because sometimes what you want is that you set multiple classes and you have different rules for each class. So you could get state, get some state, and based on the state, you could do some manipulation. So here state changes, and then what's going to happen is going to change the classes. And I can map to Tailwind here, so that it seems useful. And then the iteration, of course, that was a good thing for me to find, because what I realized is that we have a standard way of doing this. So there's what we call template in the DOM, and that's the perfect fit. That was the labeling thing. That's the X closest. So now it's tracking what header is the closest to the top. And to see it in action, so look at left. So on the left of the screen, I think we could make it faster, but on the left of the screen, I do this table of contents tracking with this X closest. So it's not a lot of code to write as a style that from this set of DOM elements, give me the closest. And the logic is inside the directive. Then we have this intersection observer, so we know when we intersected. And with this, you get the lazy loading with a couple of lines of code. So we only once set source once we intersect. And then we have this classic timer example. Promise support, but as I mentioned, maybe it's better to turn it into a state machine or something. And the error handling, might be better. And that's actually expected error. So it's like this on purpose. I want to show the error. So it's if there's the error message, then show it here. Otherwise, show the outcome. So we sort of have the state machine, but here it's it's implicit. And then I did some more complicated examples, calculators and whatever. You can look into the examples later if you want. Yeah, it crashes like I expected, so it's not. I can start coding with it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the classic to-do example we have. So I'll show you first. So it's going to look a little bit complex, but let's just read through it. So we have a X state, we have some text. That's going to keep the state of the input. Then we have the list of to-dos or array of to-dos. Then on submit, we empty it and pick up the state from text. So from this container, we put the text to to-dos. So do this concatenate operation and put it there. Yeah, that's a little trick we use to avoid refreshing the page. Then here on input, we track the value. So on input, we put the value to text. And we show the text in the input itself. So it's cyclic. And then we have this submit button. So that's just connected. It's standard DOM behavior. So on submit, we get here. And then we have the data display problem. So we get the to-dos from xstate, and then we go through its to-do and show text for each. And maybe we do some other representation. So we show through stringify, we show what's in the to-dos. But that's it. I think that's as declarative to-do app as I can write. Then we can do simple tables. I mean, then the question is, can I do more than simple tables? Maybe I could do like, I could try do virtualization, whatever. One common task accordion. So what it looks like is this. So we want to open and close. We could animate this and make it nice, but it's enough for demonstration. So what we do, we want to track some state that's Boolean in this case, which means is it visible or not. And on click we set visible or not. And then maybe we do some class manipulation based on the state as well. So if it's not visible, it's hidden. That's the logic here. Then another common task. This where I wrote tens of lines of JavaScript for this in the site. So we track which tab is active and display the contents. So in this case, what we do, we track. It just happens to be animals name tab. So we give each tab has a name, and then based on the name, we display the right button. So that's for button tracking. So that's the animals tab, that's the languages tab, and that's going to be the colors tab. And the second part is showing the content. So here we track the state. If it's not the right tab, then it's hidden. And that's the table of contents example, and that's partial. So what I could do, I could load data. So based on, I mouse over here, and then I go and load some templates, and I take the content of the template and add it to the structure. So it's just looks like it should be only once. So it has a tiny bug in it. It will be easy to fix. But we could do pages that grow as you use them. So you could do this kind of interaction-based loading. Yeah, then what I did, I wrote a tiny code editor in a couple of lines of code. So I can go here and then do something, and it more or less works. It has some bugs, but I won't show them. But the interesting thing is that it doesn't take a lot of code. So we have what we do. We track the text we show in the editor, and then when we display this, we push it through highlighter. So there is highlight.js. We're going to assume it's going to be JS code. They push the state through it. So that's going to give us this highlighted version. And then we do a little trick. We use text area for tracking the state. So what we do, there's some CSS trickery involved, but what we do is we generate the text area, show it on top of the pre, and position it right, and hide outline and so on. And then here the cursor is within the text area. So when we do a change, so on input, we're going to capture the value from the text area. We're going to set it to state here. And then, of course, this one is going to get it. And text area is going to get it. So it's this little cycle here. It's quite simple to integrate the site. So what I did, you can take one line of code and then just put it somewhere, and you get the runtime. And after that, you can start writing the code. But that's for the technical demonstration, or the first part, because what happened is I got the second part working a while ago, like 45 minutes ago. So I will show you the second part. So it's going to be ugly, but it's going to be enough. It's a tiny starter project that integrates Webpack and Tailwind and Sidewind. Let's see if we get it running. So what I mean, as I told you, it's a little ugly, but it's the interesting thing about this demonstration is that I started thinking about components. So I have like multi-page setup. Again, multiple pages. I can have like each page can have JavaScript, so I can still have this extension point. So I can write custom JavaScript per page. Then I have what I call shared file. So this file is going to be executed for each page in the system. So this where I will maybe bootstrap Sidewind. And then let's see if I can make it bigger. And then I have the pages themselves. Like here, I have index. I could add more as I want. And then what I have here is like, of course, you have some kind of layouts for different purposes. And here in the layout, here you have the HTML, you have head, you have body, and footer and whatever. And inside the page, here we inject, that's the head, that's the body. And here we discard, that's the title, that's the meta, And here we start writing the code. So here is going to be Tailwind, here is going to be Sidewind. And yeah, of course, at some point you notice that you have repetition. So then you start like thinking about it, like maybe I want buttons in my system. So now I have 2 buttons to set the thing. And then I start like doing this component library. So then I have my first button component. And what I discovered was that there is a solution called typed HTML. It's like a hidden gem. I don't think anyone uses this package, but it's completely great. Because what it gives me type-safe HTML. And the way it does it is using JSX. And then it does the mapping and it's all typed. So now I can go to my index template and let's try to break the code. Of course, it's not there because in bottom we don't have full attributes. So I get this nice starting out of the box. And the reason why I'm a little excited about this typed HTML is that it gives me something like a React component model without React. So it's important to understand that this thing here is just a template. It looks like a function, but it gives me like HTML. And out of this whole thing, we get HTML. And the crazy thing is that this whole thing here, it's evaluated on server side. So what could happen is that I could have some maybe asynchronous queries or whatever here, and it will be like it will happen on server side, and maybe I will have mix some little bit of code here, but it's going to change a little bit the way I write my sites, I think. But it's more like experiment at this point. One of the interesting things about the setup is that it's going to generate quite small sites. So now I'm building the site, and here you see I have some. Yeah, of course I need some JavaScript. I need some CSS. It's most of the CSS goes away because of the processing, because it's going to figure out which CSS classes I'm using. Yeah, I think here I have Sidewind. I could eliminate a couple of kilobytes from here, but I have some other things to do at the moment, so I haven't done it yet. And then I have the page.js, and then I have the HTML and some icon and HTML. But in total, it's not a lot. It's like maybe less than 15 kilobytes for the site. But of course, it's not a big site. It's not doing much. Then it's going to be the same here. And the point is that the logic, it just lives in the HTML and in the runtime. So I think with this approach, I could try it. I like React, but I don't like the size of React. So I could try sites like I write with React, but without using React, while getting really light outcome. So very, very light sites. Of course, I'm going to have some limitations. I cannot do every single thing. I don't have the ecosystem, but for something not too complex, this might be a nice thing to use. So I think those were the main points. So it's a different approach. It feels different, but I can see how there might be some future for this kind of approaches. And I don't expect that you're going to use it, but more like get inspired and look around what's available. So I think, yeah, there's a question. Mink wants to know, how do I evaluate the code? So let me show you. It's not eval. It's the next worst thing. So one of the things of the project that's interesting is it's not a lot of code. That's my evaluation logic. So we have is function apply, and here we push expressions through this thing here. So it's yeah, I just discovered it. It's standard JavaScript, and it works. Of course, the other question is it safe enough? But it's good enough for something like this, I think. But it's not a lot of code, and if you have time and interest, just go through it and read through it. There's some bits I can still improve. I could make this naming arbitrary so that you can give any names you want to the directives. This will be easy to pull off, but it's not done yet. But I think most of the code is quite clean and it's very, very separated. So let's say like we take and look at the intersections, and it's very pure DOM code. Can be imperative code, as ugly code as you like, but it's more about you get the nice interface in HTML. So we hide the ugliness inside the directives. And even something complex like this closest, it's doing this. Like here we do some measurements. And that's about it. But yeah, it was at least an interesting exercise for me to write a little state manager, because I never wrote the state management solution before. Yeah, that was the cool thing I found, the mutation observer. So what I do at the state container, I track changes. I track changes made within the tree, and it's recursive. I can have many states inside others, and I don't have to worry about anything because I'm relying on the properties of the DOM. So that's one of the nice side effects.
Juho, I believe there is one more question for you. You have a fan in the chat room who is learning Suomi. Is that the Finnish language?
Yeah, Suomi, Finnish language.
Kamil, would you like to join us and just speak Finnish? Just do your best.
Yeah, maybe it's shy like Finns, but let's see.
Yeah, maybe. Juho, I have one more question for you, because in your talk description, you said that you created the Sidewind because of the constraints set by your client. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what those constraints were that's made you go with a custom solution like that?
So the main point was that I will show you the client case. I think the site is more or less the way I build it. So the main constraint with the site was that the client wanted HTML, They wanted as little CSS as possible. So that Tailwind was a good fit because you can get, I think it's like 10K of CSS for the site. And the point is that the client didn't want React. They didn't want jQuery. They didn't want anything. So they wanted to meet like roughly the minimal amount of JavaScript. Let me find something. Yeah, here is the tab thing. So here is tabs, and here we have some complex JavaScript logic on the side.
So are you saying that simplicity was the most important thing?
Yeah. So for the client, they didn't care what I use as long as I don't use anything. So that was the interesting thing about the case, that they didn't want what normal clients would want. Is that they wanted something that's like old school, and that's what got me thinking that maybe we can learn something from the old school way of doing the web, while mixing the old school way with the modern thinking. And that's why I started thinking like this way, that maybe we could have something like React, but without React, and so but within the DOM, and we could still do components outside of the state management solution, and it looks like it can work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for our next project like this, when I have to do a simple site like that, I can use this approach of using typed HTML for defining my components, Sidewind for defining my state, and Tailwind for defining my styling, and then Webpack for bundling it all together and making the pages and all that. But it looks like a couple of simple bits, or not so simple bits, but this come together, and then I have a powerful solution that I can use to generate extremely light sites. So it's good. It's good thing to know.
And it works. That's great.
Yeah. That's the best thing. That I mean, you can always do what the mainstream is doing, but at the same time, it's interesting to look like how small can you make it? Because I think for most of the sites, they don't have to be really big, and even on this site, I think most of the size is images, and even that we can optimize. So there is so much we can optimize on websites and on web development if we go beyond the normal approaches and start looking in different directions.
I think that's it. Juho, thank you very much for being with us here. Thank you for your presentation.